The quiet mansion on the hill glowed softly under the moonlight. Inside, the smell of freshly polished marble filled the air. It was supposed to be another peaceful night in the luxurious home of billionaire Richard Hall. But peace has a way of hiding danger. Down the long hallway in the children's wing, a young maid named Tasha Brown had just finished her nightly chores. She was 24, dark-skinned, hardworking, and often exhausted from the endless duties assigned to her by the head housekeeper. Her job that night was simple: watch over the billionaire's 6-year-old son, Ethan Hall, while the parents attended a charity gala downtown. Tasha tried to keep her eyes open as she sat in the rocking chair near the boy's bed. The sound of the air conditioner and the child's soft breathing made her heavy eyes drift shut. "Just a few minutes," she whispered to herself. Within seconds, she fell into deep sleep. Outside the mansion walls, 3 black vans rolled silently through the private driveway. The headlights were off. Men dressed in black tactical gear stepped out, faces hidden behind masks. They moved like shadows, using codes and signals. It was not a random break-in. This was an operation. Inside, a faint creak from the window was the only sound. Ethan stirred in his sleep, but didn't wake up. The robbers worked fast, disabling the security cameras and alarms like professionals. One of them whispered, "The boys' room, 3rd door on the right." Within minutes, the billionaire's only son was lifted from his bed and carried out through the window, leaving behind nothing but his favorite teddy bear lying face down on the pillow. When Tasha woke up hours later, it was already too late. Ethan was gone. The sun rose slowly over the mansion, casting golden light through the wide glass windows. It was 6:03 a.m. when Tasha woke up with a sharp gasp. For a few seconds, she felt disoriented, her body stiff from sleeping in the chair. Then she turned to look at the bed, and her heart stopped. The blanket was empty. The little boy was gone. She jumped up, calling out, "Ethan, Ethan, wake up!" Her voice echoed through the room. Panic set in when she saw the open window and the soft curtains fluttering in the morning breeze. The teddy bear lay on the floor, and something inside her broke. She screamed for help, her voice cracking with terror. Within minutes, guards and house staff rushed in, followed by the billionaire's wife, Mrs. Hall, who had just returned from the gala. Her expensive gown trailed behind her as she stormed into the room. "What happened?" she shouted, grabbing Tasha by the shoulders. "Where is my son?" Tasha fell to her knees, shaking, tears running down her face. I don't know. He was here when I closed my eyes. I must have." "You fell asleep?" Mrs. Hall screamed, her voice trembling between fear and rage. The head of security burst in next, reporting that the back fence had been cut and all the exterior cameras disabled. It was no ordinary kidnapping. Whoever did it knew the house inside and out. Richard Hall arrived minutes later, red-eyed and furious after receiving the call. His booming voice filled the mansion. "Lock down the estate. No one leaves. Call the police, the FBI, everyone." Tasha was dragged aside by 2 guards as she pleaded, "Please, sir, I didn't mean to. I would never hurt Ethan." But no one listened. The sound of police sirens soon filled the air as chaos spread through the mansion. The Hall family's worst nightmare had begun. The mansion was in chaos. Police officers swarmed the property, marking fingerprints, checking cameras, and questioning everyone. Drones hovered over the compound while news vans began to gather outside the gates. Reporters shouted questions, hungry for a story about the billionaire's missing child. Inside, the family sat in the living room, faces pale and tired. Tasha was sitting in the corner, under watch by two police officers, still crying quietly into her palms. At 9:42 a.m., the house phone rang, an old landline, one the family rarely used. The room went silent. Richard Hall picked it up, his voice shaking. "Hello? Who is this?" A distorted voice came through the line, deep and mechanical. "We have your son," the voice said calmly. "Do not call the police again. You have exactly 48 hours to deliver $5 million in untraceable cash, or the boy disappears forever." Mrs. Hall gasped and covered her mouth. Richard's hand trembled. "Please, don't hurt him. Just let me talk to him." A short pause followed, then the faint sound of Ethan's voice crying, "Daddy, help me," echoed through the phone before the line went dead. The entire room froze. Mrs. Hall collapsed to the floor, screaming her son's name. The officers tried to trace the call, but the kidnappers had used encrypted devices. No location, no number, no trace. Tasha could barely breathe. Her guilt grew heavier by the minute. She knew everyone blamed her, and deep down, she blamed herself too. She whispered, "If I hadn't slept off, he'd still be here." But in the middle of her tears, something caught her attention. A faint smell on the curtains by the window. It was oil and smoke, mixed with a hint of something familiar, like the cologne one of the mansion's electricians used earlier that week. Her heart began to race. Maybe this wasn't just an outside job. Maybe someone inside the mansion had helped them. By midday, detectives filled the mansion. They questioned every worker, the chef, the gardeners, the drivers, and especially Tasha. The lead investigator, Detective Morgan, a tall man with sharp eyes and dark skin, observed Tasha closely as she recounted her version of events. "So, you were supposed to watch the boy, but you fell asleep," he said calmly. "That's correct?" Tasha nodded, ashamed. "Yes, sir, but I think someone helped them from inside. The window was open, but I heard no alarm. Someone knew how to turn it off." Detective Morgan looked interested. "Why do you think that?" She pointed to the window. "The curtains smell like oil. One of the electricians used something similar when fixing the light system last week. His name's Kyle. He was here 2 days ago." Morgan wrote down the name. "Interesting. We'll check that." But before leaving, he warned, "Don't go anywhere. You're still a suspect until proven otherwise." Meanwhile, Richard Hall met privately with his security chief. "I want names. Everyone who's been near this house in the last month," he ordered. "I'll pay anything to get my son back." Mrs. Hall, however, wanted Tasha fired immediately. "She fell asleep. That's unforgivable," she cried. But Richard stopped her. "If she is guilty, she'll pay. But if she's not, I want to know who's framing her." Later that evening, Tasha sneaked into the storage room near the servants' quarters, desperate to find clues. She noticed muddy boot prints near the back door, fresh ones. They led toward the fence that had been cut. She followed the trail, her heart pounding, until she found a small object half buried in the grass. A silver keychain engraved with the initials K.S. Her mind raced. Kyle Simmons, the electrician. She quickly ran back to the mansion and told Detective Morgan. He immediately sent a team to track down Kyle's location. What they discovered shocked everyone. Kyle had disappeared that very morning. Night fell again over the city, but no one in the Hall mansion could rest. The police had found Kyle's apartment completely empty, his tools gone, clothes missing, and his phone left behind with the SIM card destroyed. It was clear he had run away, but the question remained, why? Detective Morgan gathered his team in the control room. A digital map of the city glowed on the screen, showing every possible route Kyle could have taken after leaving the estate. Meanwhile, Tasha sat alone in her quarters, her mind heavy with guilt and confusion. She replayed everything in her head: the moment she fell asleep, the strange silence in the house, the smell of oil, the faint clicking sound she heard before drifting off. Suddenly, she remembered something important. The night before the kidnapping, she had seen Kyle talking to one of the delivery drivers near the back gate. She hadn't thought much of it then, but now it seemed suspicious. She rushed to tell Detective Morgan, who immediately ordered an investigation into the delivery company. Hours later, the police traced the delivery van Kyle was last seen with to an abandoned industrial area on the outskirts of the city. It was a stretch of old warehouses used years ago for construction supplies. When the SWAT team arrived quietly, they surrounded the building. Through a broken window, they saw shadows moving inside. 4 men, heavily armed, and a small boy tied to a chair in the middle of the room. Ethan was crying softly. "Team Alpha, hold positions," Morgan whispered into his radio. He didn't want to risk the child's life. But before they could move, one of the kidnappers spotted movement outside. Gunfire erupted, echoing through the empty street. The kidnappers grabbed Ethan and ran toward the back exit. Inside the chaos, one of them turned, and it was Kyle. He wasn't just an accomplice, he was the mastermind. The night exploded with gunfire and sirens. Red and blue lights flashed across the cracked walls of the old warehouse as SWAT officers shouted commands and ducked behind their shields. Detective Morgan led the charge, his pistol raised, eyes locked on the fleeing suspects. Inside, Kyle dragged Ethan through a back door, shouting at his men to move faster. The boy stumbled and cried, terrified and weak. "Keep quiet," Kyle hissed, pressing his gun to the child's back. His crew, 3 masked men, split up, trying to confuse the police. Outside, Tasha, who had insisted on coming with the officers, waited anxiously in one of the vehicles. She couldn't sit still. "I can't let him die because of me," she muttered, jumping out before anyone could stop her. As Kyle ran through the dark alleyways behind the warehouse, Tasha spotted him. "Ethan!" she screamed, her voice echoing through the night. Kyle turned sharply, his face tightening when he recognized her. "You again," he spat, pointing the gun toward her. "Stay back or he dies." Tasha froze, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Kyle, he's just a child. You don't have to do this." For a brief second, something flickered in Kyle's eyes. Guilt, maybe, even regret. But it vanished quickly. He pulled Ethan closer, stepping backward toward an old pickup truck. Just then, a shot rang out. Not from Kyle, but from one of his own men being taken down by police. In the confusion, Ethan bit Kyle's hand and broke free. The boy ran toward Tasha, screaming for help. Tasha dashed forward, scooping him into her arms as bullets whizzed past. She shielded him with her body, running toward the police line. Morgan and his team covered her with gunfire, taking down 2 kidnappers. But Kyle escaped in the truck, his tires screeching into the darkness. Ethan was finally safe, but the man who planned it all was still out there. Back at the mansion, the atmosphere was heavy with relief and confusion. Ethan had been rescued and taken to the hospital for observation. He clung tightly to Tasha's hand the whole time, refusing to let go. "She saved me," he whispered to the nurses. "She's my hero." Those words melted the heart of everyone who heard them, even Mrs. Hall, who could barely look Tasha in the eye before. Meanwhile, Detective Morgan was busy piecing together the puzzle. Kyle Simmons, 32, a skilled electrician, had no criminal record. He had been working at the Hall mansion for nearly 6 months without issue. But when the team dug deeper, a shocking truth emerged. Kyle had once worked for one of Richard Hall's rival companies, a firm that went bankrupt after Richard's business outbid them for a massive government contract. Kyle's brother, who had been a co-owner, lost everything and later took his own life. This wasn't just about money, Morgan said gravely during the debriefing. It was revenge. The billionaire sat in silence, staring at the floor. He finally muttered, "So this is my fault." Morgan nodded slightly. "Indirectly, yes. Kyle wanted you to suffer the same pain he did. He planned everything, studied your security systems, hired those men, and used his access to disable the alarms." Later that evening, when Richard went to thank Tasha for saving his son, she broke down in tears. "Sir, I failed at first. I slept when I shouldn't have." But Richard shook his head. "You woke up and fought for him when it mattered. That's what counts." Even Mrs. Hall nodded quietly, her pride softened by gratitude. However, Detective Morgan wasn't done. "Kyle is still out there," he warned, "and men like him don't run forever. They come back." Tasha's stomach tightened. Something told her this nightmare wasn't truly over yet. 3 days passed, but peace still felt far away. Police patrols guarded the mansion day and night, while helicopters scanned the nearby woods. Kyle was still missing, and everyone feared he would strike again. Inside the mansion, Tasha stayed close to Ethan, reading him bedtime stories to calm his nerves. But deep down, she couldn't rest. She knew men like Kyle didn't just disappear. That night, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked over the hills and rain poured heavily against the glass walls. The power flickered once, then went out completely. The backup generator kicked in, but the lights dimmed and flickered strangely, as if someone was tampering with the system. Detective Morgan, who had been staying in the guest room for security, rushed to the control room. He froze when he saw the CCTV feed glitching. Someone was inside the compound again. He called out to the guards, "Everyone, alert! He's back!" Downstairs, Tasha heard a noise from the hallway. Slow, heavy footsteps. She grabbed Ethan and hid him in the closet, whispering, "Stay quiet, no matter what." Then she stepped into the corridor, her heart pounding. A flash of lightning lit up the figure ahead. Kyle, drenched in rain, holding a gun and wearing a bitter, broken expression. "You ruined everything, Tasha," he said coldly. "I was supposed to make him pay. You took that from me." Tasha's voice trembled, but stayed strong. "You could have walked away. You chose hate instead." Before he could answer, Morgan appeared behind him, gun drawn. "Drop it, Kyle. It's over." Kyle turned slightly, eyes flickering between surrender and madness. Then he pointed the gun at Richard Hall, who had just stepped into the hall. A single shot echoed, followed by another. When the smoke cleared, Kyle lay on the marble floor, shot in the shoulder, alive but defeated. The nightmare was finally ending. 3 days passed, but peace still felt far away. Police patrols guarded the mansion day and night, while helicopters scanned the nearby woods. Kyle was still missing, and everyone feared he would strike again. Inside the mansion, Tasha stayed close to Ethan, reading him bedtime stories to calm his nerves. But deep down, she couldn't rest. She knew men like Kyle didn't just disappear. That night, a storm rolled in. Thunder cracked over the hills and rain poured heavily against the glass walls. The power flickered once, then went out completely. The backup generator kicked in, but the lights dimmed and flickered strangely, as if someone was tampering with the system. Detective Morgan, who had been staying in the guest room for security, rushed to the control room. He froze when he saw the CCTV feed glitching. Someone was inside the compound again. He called out to the guards, "Everyone, alert! He's back!" Downstairs, Tasha heard a noise from the hallway. Slow, heavy footsteps. She grabbed Ethan and hid him in the closet, whispering, "Stay quiet no matter what." Then she stepped into the corridor, her heart pounding. A flash of lightning lit up the figure ahead. Kyle, drenched in rain, holding a gun and wearing a bitter, broken expression. "You ruined everything, Tasha," he said coldly. "I was supposed to make him pay. You took that from me." Tasha's voice trembled, but stayed strong. "You could have walked away. You chose hate instead." Before he could answer, Morgan appeared behind him, gun drawn. "Drop it, Kyle. It's over." Kyle turned slightly, eyes flickering between surrender and madness. Then he pointed the gun at Richard Hall, who had just stepped into the hall. A single shot echoed, followed by another. When the smoke cleared, Kyle lay on the marble floor, shot in the shoulder, alive but defeated. The nightmare was finally ending. Rain still fell softly over the mansion as the police carried Kyle away in handcuffs. His face was pale, his voice quiet. "He took everything from me," he muttered as they placed him in the car. "Now he'll know what it feels like." His words sent a chill through everyone watching. The gates closed behind the officers, and for the first time in days, the Hall family could finally breathe again. Inside, Ethan was safe in his room, wrapped in his blanket, sleeping peacefully. Mrs. Hall sat by his bed, tears falling down her cheeks, not of fear this time, but of gratitude. She turned to Tasha, who stood quietly by the door. "I judged you too quickly," she said softly. "You risked your life for my son. Thank you." Tasha bowed her head humbly. "I just did what any mother would do," she replied. Detective Morgan gave his final report that night. "Kyle confessed," he said. "He planned the kidnapping for months. He used your old security system against you, Mr. Hall. It was never about money. It was about revenge." Richard nodded slowly. "Then maybe I needed this reminder," he said. "Sometimes success blinds us. I was building a bigger empire, but I couldn't see the people working right under me." He looked at Tasha. "You stayed when most people would have run. You have my respect and my promise. You'll never have to worry again." Weeks later, the mansion was quieter, safer, but changed forever. Ethan's laughter returned, though it carried a little more wisdom. Tasha stayed on as part of the family, no longer just a maid, but a protector they trusted with their lives. And for everyone who followed the story on the news, it became more than a headline. It became a warning. Moral lesson: never underestimate the quiet ones who serve you, nor the silent pain of those you overlook. Wealth and power cannot replace vigilance, humility, or human connection. As parents, never take your child's safety for granted, not even for a minute. And as a society, we must remember that bitterness grows in silence when compassion disappears.